I find it interesting that every single week or month or year that goes by, there's another fad diet that becomes popular. And as of late, the one that has been rising to the top of the list and become overly popular is this thing called the keto diet. And as the keto diet has been out there more and more and more, we're starting to see that there really is a link between an increased risk and of heart attack or stroke. Now, of course, that's going to be a certain type of keto diet.
Well, it's funny you mentioned a certain type. There's a proper keto diet, and then one I call the Americanized keto diet. This can tell the difference. This is funny. You can look back at history of the ketogenic diet, which is typically the common factor of both, low carbohydrates. Proper ketogenic diet is a lot of plants, a lot of that stuff right there. It's a lot of those above ground, non-root, low glycemic vegetables.
Non-starchy stuff.
That's right. And so it's a bunch of that. It has your fats basically coming from things like nuts and seeds and avocados, and it has a small amount of protein. It was used historically to remedy things like epilepsy. And then, of course, it went out of mainstream once medications came on board. So you go back and find the ketogenic-oriented diet, early 1900s, and it was used to reverse type 2 diabetes. That's proper ketogenic diet. Now, Americans are infamous or famous, however you want to look at that, for taking something that's pretty good and, well, just making it what they want it to be and then justifying it. American version of ketogenic diet is a lot of bacon and sausage and cheese and making it in a casserole and don't eat any vegetables. That's what they're talking about in that study. So they've even misdefined the idea of ketogenic diet based upon that study, because that's not ketogenic diet. That's something else. That's a high-fat, high-processed fat diet, which is just, well, it's not going to do any good for the body.
Well, and it's interesting. If we draw blood off of an individual right after they've eaten a very high-fat diet, the serum looks like fat. It's just, it looks like milk. And what we don't do in mainstream medicine is we don't draw blood right after a fatty meal. We wait till somebody's completely fasted and cleaned up their blood.
Yep.
So we don't get to really see the true effects of what's coming in the gut and going through the system after some of these high-fat diets. Now, if a person is on a ketogenic diet, there's a very low percentage of people that can likely genetically even handle the amount of fat that's coming in from something that's just, like you said, sausage and bacon and butter and oils.
It's not just that. We're not saying that fat's bad.
Right.
Make sure you know that. It's not that fat's bad. Fat is good. You need to eat fat, but it needs to come from proper sources. Trans fat, hydrogenated fats, no, don't do that. But those are in the typical standard American ketogenic options. And
that's it.
Yeah, and it's like the reason that quote-unquote diet works, or most diets work, whether it be, Lion diet, which is basically that right there, or Mediterranean, or the DASH diet, or all these things. It's because we remove the garbage. When you remove the garbage, of course it's going to work, right? If you keep the carbohydrates fairly low from a low glycemic source, of course it's going to work. So people do get benefits, but in this case, with the study you're talking about, of course it led to higher cardiovascular and cardiac disease risk. Of course, because it didn't have the things that bring cardiac protection, which are the polyphenols in the plants.
So in terms of ketogenic, let's clarify what is good. It's going to be semi-Mediterranean, which is plants, lots of plants. The system needs fiber, it needs phytonutrients, it needs the polyphenols. It needs all of those things to help do a body good. It needs less sugars, processed things, and the right types of fat, those being monounsaturated, polyunsaturated fats in the right proportion for the person that's consuming a ketogenic diet.
Yeah, and the other aspect of that's right. And the ketogenic diet, I think it's probably wise for people to understand what that is. So when the body doesn't have these carbohydrates to turn to glucose, okay, which is good. Our bodies are not designed to run primarily from glucose. Key point. So when the body is relatively low in glucose, right, and we burn those stores out through our liver and our muscles, the body can in turn convert some of these fats into these ketones.
Right.
Now, ketones, hence the ketogenic diet, are nothing but short-chain fatty acids that can be used to fuel the body in place of the glucose.
In fact, I believe the brain prefers ketones.
The brain does, and it's fascinating.
And the heart.
I'm sure people have heard of like TBIs, or traumatic brain injuries, from football players. You know, when their brain goes into an injury status,
shock state,
it shocks and it doesn't use glucose as well. So your body starts immediately producing ketones. And so wouldn't it be good to do the proper ketogenic diet all the time for everybody? And that even for athletes, maybe a little supplementation with perhaps exogenous ketones, right? That would be a smart move, I think, right?
Well, if you look at the hunter-gatherers back in the day, they were living off the land. They didn't have all the hydrogenated oils, the trans fats. They weren't soaking their meat in oils and marinating them. They were eating off the land. So in essence, that's a semi-ketogenic Mediterranean protocol that's rich in all the polyphenols, the phytonutrients, the fiber, and the right kind of fats that do a body good.
Yeah, and so the best diet, if you get down to it, I kind of call it the Noah principle. You know, when Noah hopped off the boat, you know, with him and his family, you know, and our genes have changed only 2% in 10,000 years. You know, God told them to just basically eat, well, that stuff and what's in the land.
It wasn't processed, it's fresh.
Yeah, if you can't find in a, you know, out in nature in that proper form, it's probably not food anyway. So we probably need to avoid it. So long and short of that is that Americanized ketogenic is dangerous. But when you eat real food and proper ketogenic, Mediterranean-ish style, it's going to be beneficial.
And it takes time to chew these things.
Yeah.
Instead of inhaling them like oftentimes we do when we eat the standard American kind of food.
Mess. So eat real food. That's the moral of that story.
And when you navigate through these economies with people, here's what happens. We want to hold their hand through it, let them know when it's time to buy, sell, reallocate, get out of Dodge. Because a lot of times when you're struck with fear, fear does two things. Number one, it can paralyze, and people just put their head in the sand and say, I'm just going to forget about it and hopefully it gets better. Or it causes you to make a wrong decision. And this is why we are here, is to help people navigate through the political quagmire nonsense that's going on, the economic malaise, and the absolute collapse that we're seeing. And when our freedoms are eroding, our political freedoms, our economic freedoms, our personal freedoms, our religious freedoms, our health freedoms, they're all tied together. But you know what doesn't need to erode with that? Our finances.
KirkElliottPhD.com/Sherwood.
Have you ever witnessed any miracles in your lives about anything that you would think of that could be along the same kind of line, if you had any kind of parallel with it?
I guess like my mom and I moving to the country. You know, that was like a big gamble. We moved on the 4th of July, so our anniversary is coming up on moving here. And then that was a huge gamble that she took. I was 4, so I didn't realize what it was. But I don't think if we stayed in Hungary, I would be here right now making this movie. You know, so I guess that's the closest in my life that I have to like kind of a miracle that I didn't know was gonna happen.
For me, I actually, when I was like 5 or 6, something like that, I had some kind of disease with like my kidneys that is like super rare and they only study about in med school, but they never really saw a case. So I had it. So I had like doctors from all over like the States kind of coming in and looking at me.
Wow.
And I technically died for like 10 seconds. I flatlined.
Whoa.
Yeah, my mom went out to grab a Buzz Lightyear VHS that I really liked. And when she came back, it was like complete flatline. And I saw an angel that day, which was pretty crazy because the first thing I said to my mom apparently was that there was a really nice man with blonde hair and blue eyes, like saying it's okay.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's pretty crazy.
That's insane. And I'm also so glad I went first. And, I wouldn't have been able to top that. Wow. That's amazing.
Let's get real. Most emergency food is just as bad for you as any other choice in the standard American diet. And that's just sad.
We don't just need food, we need highly nutritional food.
We don't just want to survive food shortages, we are meant to thrive in adversity.
Complete your daily nutrition and have shelf-stable Kingdom Fuel as a cornerstone of your food supply.
Don't sacrifice your health or your taste buds.
Stock up on Kingdom Fuel now.